welcome back to the Bacta podcast. We're here as always with, well, he's got a bad feeling about this. It's Rob Fonda.
Oh, but you know what? Something good will come around. It always does.
And, well, he's back to this week. He was on a bender in Gungan City with some friends on Naboo, and here's Cameron Hill.
Damn, you got yourself, banned from the city by Boss Nass.
And you brought a little trinket back, a little
Did.
souvenir. Look at this.
This is,
Wow.
I may not be here next week in person. I may try to go in if we do it remotely or whatever. Maybe
Yeah.
call in. But I am having a baby, and this is
It's very cute.
addition to paraphernalia.
Little onesie says, "Never tell me the odds." Put it out there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Very
well,
cute.
that's a lucky kid. He's just going to be fully immersed in the lore.
Absolutely, Cam is not going to slouch.
No,
yeah.
definitely not. So a little switch up this week. I'm gonna bat lead off here, and we're gonna kind of jump into the episode. This is Far, Far Away.
Take us through it, Keith.
So episode 6 kicks off with Ahsoka and Huyang inside the Purrgil on the way to catch up with Sabine. Ahsoka confesses that she knows Sabine went willingly, with Huyang says that's impossible, but also a likely choice that she was gonna make no matter what. Ahsoka asks to hear a story after initially rejecting, from a Jedi temple where Huyang begins with the fabled words, "A long, long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away."
Man, this gave me chills a little bit.
Right?
I was like, oh, that's cool. That's a nice little touch. I like that their children's stories start with that. That's really fun.
Yeah, it was. I thought it was such a great little small scene that like didn't necessarily need to be in there plot wise, but like it was such a
Made you feel good.
it made you feel like, oh, Star Wars.
Yeah, bringing the wonder back in, and Purrgil. They say that at least when they were first introduced, that they were sort of this immediate inspiration for these races that saw them to try space travel in the first place. So we're really seeing how maybe this used to happen, and certainly later on, Elsbeth mentions that her people were Purrgil riders.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
I thought that was really interesting. Is that established in the lore, or is that just is that a new thing we're learning here?
That seemed completely new to me,
Yeah.
Cam, unless you are aware of anything.
I think that was something set up for this. Because, they weren't really... Anytime the Deathmere witches were brought up into the stuff that I was in, the Purrgil were never mentioned, so it was kind of a separate...
No, and even what I was aware of as the kind of being the first spacefaring race of Star Wars was the Duros, which you see a few of those in the original trilogy. They are like Thrawn, blue-faced, red eyes. They kind of look like your traditional.
They're like a cousin to the Nemoidian, which are the guys from Episode 1.
Yeah.
Trade Federation. Yeah, they look very similar to that.
Got it. Okay.
And you used to see those guys around. They were originally in Legends the ones that first developed the hyperdrive, and they were the first race to do that interstellar travel.
And they're blue.
They're blue. Abadi abadi.
Exactly. Did you guys? I found it very kind of fitting because I'm in Rebels at the point where we just had the first interaction with the Purrgil.
Oh, cool.
And Ezra and the fuel cells and like all that sort of thing. So it was a lot of Purrgil this week, essentially, which was great.
Interesting thing on that I saw somebody point out online is that the Purrgil in Rebels have those little lumpy teeth.
Yeah.
And in this they have the what we would see
Whale
as
teeth.
whale teeth. I don't know exactly what those are
They're
called.
called baleen.
Baleen, yes.
Which is kind of funny with
trivia
Balin.
there.
It's like I don't think it's the same. But
Probably no connection, but interesting nonetheless.
that is like a deep internet, like, I don't know, theory beginning of like
100%.
how they connect. It's like, no, it just like that name.
Very deep. Yeah, very deep lore.
Yeah, I found it kind of the cartoon version of it is a little funny. Like there's a moment when the whales like have the teeth and they're very much like Pinocchio whales in that, like as opposed to
They're like, "Meh."
sorry, what if like Cam one more time?
I just see a Pac-Man mouth.
And they like eat one of the big
They
bad
do.
guy in Rebels, and I was like, oh, that's a different story.
A bit more aggressive, very Jonah and the Whale sort of thing in that episode.
Oh boy, I was also kind of hoping that Huyang was going to tell a story. I'm kind of bummed that he didn't.
I was ready for something too, because he was saying these are like the stuff that they would like the stuff about like the long time ago Jedi.
Yeah.
Stuff about the early times of the universe, and like we don't have a whole lot of like information from any of that, so it would have been cool to kind of little tidbit.
No, yeah,
story.
that would have been really cool, and I do have some something about this this other galaxy that I want to touch on maybe towards the end of our episode.
Yeah, for
I don't
sure.
want to get into it quite now.
Okay. So continuing on, Shin, Morgan, Balin, and Sabine meet up with the Night Mothers, and it's revealed that their visions are what guided Morgan to them. They say that yes, Thrawn is here, and that he's on his way, and that once they meet up with Thrawn, he tells them they must pack up his starship and leave the galaxy. He's ready to go and start some shit.
He absolutely is, and like this, having Thrawn come back, especially having Lars Mikkelsen back in the role, he's to me just so great. His line delivery is spot on. I know there's been a lot of talk about the wig, which I can certainly see some conversations about that. But as far as his performance, I thought it was just so cool to see him do this in live action, and just that. I love his performance for Thrawn. Just like totally even keel, just unflappable. This dude, he's just like 12 steps ahead of you every step of the way, and nothing surprises him. And to see that in live action, like he's a great villain. He's a very, very cool villain.
Solid. And I think it's a great transition from that whole cartoon comic book expanded universe character and bringing him to the live action. Finally, it was a nice reintroduction to the character almost. And just the voice matching just with Rebels, that seamless it's been a very seamless transition from Rebels to this, which I've loved, and I think that's another aspect of that, is just having someone with the same voice and all that is just, it's going to make it that much better.
Interesting.
Yeah. And even speaking of the voices, going back to when they first arrive on the planet and we run into those three great mothers.
Yeah. I was going to touch on that first.
I mean, Keith, you want to lead us through it?
Well, I mean, I to me, that moment when the three mothers are, they have their little kind of spheres that are then entrap Sabine and like can force her down into the hole, and I kind of glossed over it, but the three mothers, I mean, that's a big part of Clone Wars, and it's, I mean, we kind of talked about it earlier, but we got some more Night Sister stuff,
More Night Sister stuff.
Every episode there's a little bit more, and they're diving a little bit more into that, and but I do feel like we haven't really seen them do their thing yet. And if I hadn't watched Clone Wars, I would not know, like, oh my God, Dathomir, or like, oh, like they're the three sisters. No, it's like they're also kind of, if you're familiar with like mythology, they're like the Fates.
They truly are.
I mean, it's a 1-to-1 pretty much comparison.
And something I saw today, just online, is that it not only is it like a subtle nod, it's maybe a little less subtle, because their names are literally like the Greek gods or goddesses of the Fates are Clotho, Lachesis, I'm probably butchering these names, so forgive me. And
You're not Greek?
And Ultrapos, I'm not, despite some recent tattoo art I got. But the Clotho, Lachesis, and Ultrapos, I'll go with that. And the Great Mothers, their names are Clothau, Laxis, and Octropal. Like basically 1-to-1. Renames of those Greek, fates that they have in their mythology.
Yeah, I think I really liked the way their costumes and their makeup was done. I thought it wasn't too over the top, but it felt like they were of the Star Wars world, maybe a little bit different. Yeah. But as much as you guys loved Thrawn, for me, well, first of all, first I have a bone to pick with Disney.
Sure.
This week, they posted both photos of Ezra and last week on their like behind the episode, or like that they released, they had the scene of Thrawn in the and I was like, I'm
glad I did not. Did it spoil it for you?
Well, I mean, I had never seen Thrawn before, right? I hadn't watched him. He's not come up in the Rebels yet.
Man.
And so for me to be like, oh,
that's rough.
And it's like, he's got this huge, great villain intro in this, like with the gigantic starship coming down that's all kind of beat up, and the chanting, and like, I want to talk about that as well. Like, what did you guys think of the sort of the fanfare and kind of the intro and the kind of world of, I mean, this is like our first intro into Thrawn world, I guess, or like what he's been doing for the last however many years.
Probably like 5 to 10 years, essentially stranded out there.
And like, again, I don't know what he looks like or what his deal is in Rebels, but to me, that Stormtrooper helmet with the face on it, I was like, oh my God, that's awesome. And then like the wraps
his
around
remnant army was very, very interesting looking. Like, you could tell they'd been there for a while, but they were like, we will die for this guy. Obviously. Like they were
the chants and all that stuff. I mean, I don't know, this is me asking the question, how much of that is kind of already established in the lore?
Not a ton of it. Like, what I'll say about that is based, Thrawn comes in on Rebels, and by the time Rebels is happening, the Night Sisters in the galaxy we're familiar with in Star Wars are essentially functionally extinct.
Gone.
Yeah.
They've been mostly wiped out, minus a couple characters similar to the Jedi. So he at that point had no relationship to the Night Sisters that I knew of.
Yeah.
So this relationship that he's developed with them is completely new.
Yeah.
And even these remnant troops are not something that he had. He didn't have his own customized troops when he was commanding, when he was, an admiral in the Empire. So all of that whole look is completely new.
Interesting.
Something that stood out to me as I watch pretty much everything with subtitles on is I believe at one point, I saw in the subtitles that they were referred to as night troopers.
Oh.
So a little bit of a different name. Obviously, we see they've customized their armor a bit. I don't remember what I do remember from the end of Rebels, and spoilers for you, Keith, unfortunately, is that when Ezra and Thrawn are transported by the Purrgil, they are in a Star Destroyer.
Yes.
So have to assume that's that same one.
That's what I assumed when he kind of showed up with that ship. I was like, oh, and I was like, oh, he probably just got booted by with all
Basically,
these
the
all these
Purrgil
dudes.
got its tentacles into the ship, and then they took off with it. Essentially.
Gotcha.
So he somehow managed to boot Ezra off of this, or somehow managed to claim this as his own. And I don't remember there being a lot of other troops on board, but this could be a combination of any sort of Imperial remnant that were still any sort of crew that were still on board that ship, and also any sort of, again, Night Sister stuff, any sort of people that they've pulled into their thrall, that they're
undead or weird like the reanimated, like we did with our port, what's his name, Marok.
Oh yes, Marok, exactly.
So I wondered if they have the mothers there. I mean, I'm sure they can do wild stuff.
They have, and on Clone Wars we see that there's Night Sister zombies, and we've seen those even in Jedi Fallen Order.
Yeah.
And they are also had used the Night Brothers, the Zabrak on the other side of the planet, as their own personal soldiers that could be boosted with that Night Sister magic stuff. But yeah, the gold-faced stormtrooper named Enoch reminded me a lot of. Just completely tangentially, I don't think this has anything to do with or a reference that they're making, but one of the gladiators in the movie Gladiator, Tigris, I think was his name. He had a very similar kind of crying face plate sort of thing, but he looks very cool. And if Star Wars has told us anything, if you look cool, you're probably gonna die in a lame way.
But they'll make a really cool action figure.
They'll make a great collectible.
It's awesome. Yeah, I feel like people are gonna want to know more about him and kind of the character in general. I mean, did you guys notice? And maybe this is me going too deep into it, but on the bottom of the ship, there were these markings that looked a lot like Maul's.
They did.
There was definitely people were doing their. These people have been away from the Empire. I think the organized Empire for a while. So they're definitely kind of going down their own path. And I think how you mentioned how the Night Sisters are there, and they definitely feel like they've injected themselves into this remnant force for sure. It's kind of a hand-in-hand production almost.
Yeah, and all those tattoos that Maul and Savage have that's more Night Sister stuff. Zabrak aren't born that way.
Exactly.
Those are all tattoos and tribal tattoos that they are given. So it would make sense that if this is kind of being, this Imperial remnant is merging with this Night Sister remnant, that there's a merging of cultures as well. And obviously, if they've been stuck out here following this guy for the last 10 years, you could see why they would be so fervent and loyal to this guy if he's the entire reason they've survived in this, what we see to be a pretty hostile environment.
I found it very interesting that when they were talking about how this is where the Purrgil come to die.
Yeah.
Which I was not expecting that to be a thing, and the fact that, and also made me wonder are the Purrgil that are transporting Ahsoka and them are they going to die? Is that what
their send off?
Yeah, I was kind of, I don't know. What do you guys think?
It could be. It reminded me a lot of the idea of an elephant graveyard.
I was gonna say that.
Yes,
exactly.
very Lion King elephant graveyard.
Yeah,
in a situation.
And having that ring around the planet made up of their bones was such a cool, haunting, just mood setter for what we were about to see. And it may be something where maybe not all of them die, but maybe some of them are just all right, I'm going off to my final
their final journey, and the family comes along, and then they say their goodbyes or whatever. And
right.
Hyperspace away again. Interesting.
And do you know, this is pretty much a brand new planet for Star Wars.
Yeah.
So Do you guys have any guesses? I mean, we can get into a little bit later when Balin starts talking about his whole thing, but guesses as to like the significance of this planet, other than the fact that it was kind of on the end of the galaxy.
I mean, it being the birth world of the Death Mirror Witches itself, I think gives it a lot of significance, meaning that I'm assuming they got a lot of power there, and that's probably why they're there. And the Three Sisters, I'm assuming and seeing a tough fight ahead of Ahsoka and Sabine against them if they have to fight anybody, because it seems like this is their world. So
Yeah.
they know the layout, and there could be something even deeper within the world that we don't know about.
Yeah, that's being hinted towards. Yeah.
What was interesting to me is, yes, we see that not only is this a new planet, but it has been developed, or at least at some time had a greater civilization, right? We see, you know, these old statues that are standing and left, erected and having fallen, and clearly they have fallen on some tough times. It's tough to not really clear if these great mothers are leftovers, if they were stranded themselves, or just the last of their kind. But what I do find really interesting about it is within the lore of Star Wars, obviously you have the way that people use the Force. You have the Jedi and the Sith and the light and the dark, and then you have the Dathomirian Night Sisters kind of off on their own thing.
Cultists, if you will.
Yeah, they have a different interpretation and way that they manipulate and use the Force, which makes sense that if they're from a completely different galaxy, they could have come over from something completely different. And kind of think about it now, it reminds me a lot of, to dip into the anime world, Full Metal Alchemist. There's this, they have this energy that that are harnessed in this country, that is harnessed by alchemy, that they use, and it's just the way that they use that energy. And then there's another country that you find out later on that manipulates those same powers, but in a completely different way, that they call alkahestry. And it feels like it's obviously not necessarily a reference to that, but it reminded me a lot of just, hey, we're doing the same thing and using these same energies, but in a completely different way that you might not have thought of. Yeah. And that difference in those cultures was really interesting to me.
Yeah. I'm excited to see more Night Sister stuff. It feels like there's going to be some coming through.
Absolutely.
So, Sabine gets put into the cell. There's a moment where Balin comes by, and they kind of have a little chat. That's actually a little bit before, but I wanted to talk about this moment because I was really just in general about Sabine, just kind of disappointed with her. That's the way she was written, the way it was acted. This I loved this episode for a lot of reasons. Yeah, but I just feel like right now she is like the weak point of the show, and there's these moments where she just said, "We had a deal," we had
it
a
was
deal.
A little like,
what did you think?
You didn't see this coming?
Yeah, what did you think was going to happen?
And it's like she doesn't, and then so obviously Thrawn hears that Sabine is there and wishes to meet with her. He knows her well, and then Thrawn tells her that he'll honor Balin's deal to not harm her and help her find Ezra, since she's the reason Morgan was able to get to him. But like, to me, there's in that conversation with Thrawn, it's like it's so childish. She just acts like there's so many times where I feel like she says something that she doesn't need to say, or she just she's just so solely simple-minded, focused on this, and I don't sense any sense of like complication within her. I just felt like she's been underwritten.
And even not even any like remorse, being like, oh shoot, Thrawn's here and he's got a Force with him. I've made a mistake. Not even a lot of like self-reflecting stuff. There is more or less, but like, when are you guys letting me go so I can go get Ezra and we can go powwow together? It was not even like oh shoot, these guys are gonna go back and this war is gonna actually happen and I'm the cause of this.
Yeah, and like, how do you not see the idea that they're gonna follow her and find Ezra? Like it's just so simple. And for her,
obviously they've not found Ezra yet and actively looking for him. So of course, it's kind of like we're waiting for you to go do what we don't want to do, basically.
And for her, she's a Mandalorian. She's been a rebel. She's gone on all these missions and done all these different things. To her, I have all this experience, and to just be so blinded by this, I found it to be, I don't know, just I feel like she was just not served properly as a character personally, and in this episode especially. But I mean, we talked about it in previous episodes as well, where I just feel like they're either not giving her enough, or they're giving her words that she just doesn't need to be saying. Like, if she was just solemn and just taking all of that, being like, I know what I did. I'm here and I hate you. I hate your guts. I know what you did. And just do that with your face and the emotion of the scene, and not like, we had a deal, you stink, Thrawn. Like, it's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought that this episode, more than any of the others, I agree with you on that point. I feel like, there's a difference between characters making a choice that you wouldn't make, and the character acting dumb.
Yeah.
And I feel like previous to this episode, Sabine was making choices that maybe a lot of people wouldn't make, or make the viewers frustrated. But personally, I can see why she might do that.
Yeah.
This episode in particular, I just kind of felt frustrated. Well, what did you think was happening?
The resolve for her resolutions to herself about what the decision she'd made didn't seem to come through.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was less about her just making a different choice and more about her just being, who you're dealing with. You have to put this together already.
Yeah.
You're not being brought into the fold. You are bait.
You're in handcuffs.
Yeah. You're in handcuffs.
Like, you obviously didn't go. Like, I love how everyone's like, she went with them willingly, but it's like then it'll cut to a scene and she's just in handcuffs, and it's like, it wasn't super willing. Like, She's obviously given up a bit, but they didn't see any of that. So it's going to be interesting once Ahsoka gets there and they have their next meeting, how their energy is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And we do get a moment of her again trying to use the Force in the jail cell. I even thought for a moment when they threw her in the jail cell, there have been so many nods to previous Star Wars properties that she was going to get thrown in there, and waiting in the corner in the shadows was going to be Ezra. But
I had a moment of that where there's that slit in the door, and I was just like, is he gonna be on the other side, or like it was gonna be like an Andor moment when or does it Rogue One when he's like the pilot's like next door to them in the cell,
or even Han and Chewie when Han gets thrown into the prison cell at Jabba's palace.
A lot of prison cells.
Yeah, a lot of people getting reunited in prison cells. So I thought that's where we were headed. Turns out not so much. But also still, Sabine not using the Force, trying to call out to Ahsoka, it seems unsuccessfully, trying to open the door, definitely unsuccessfully. And she's still got a long way to go with her Force training, which to me earlier in the episode, as they were arriving and the Great Mothers were like, oh, it reeks of Jedi. I'm like, are they really talking about Sabine right now? Because there's not a whole lot that she's done that's been very Jedi-ish.
I think they almost were alluding to Balin too.
I wondered that.
Yeah. Because they kind of talked to him in a similar way, because he was like, I'm not a Jedi anymore.
And okay, a lot of people say that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
I found it interesting that he kept harping on this, like, they brought another one. Like they just kept
the unexpected.
They kept like being like these are kind of like tattletales almost.
Yeah, a little
at
bit.
the end when they're like, about Ezra or whatever, it's just like I found them a little funny, honestly, in that regard.
And that is interesting too, of just seeing like how much they have seen the future and how much they have expected of all this to transpire versus, Sabine was not part of the vision.
She's an anomaly of some sort.
This was unexpected.
Yeah.
And that, we'll see how that plays out, but obviously that's going to be somewhat the flaw in their ultimate plan.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to kind of discuss, because I know we had talked about it as well, is the idea that so we've officially put Shin and Balin in the mercenary category.
Yeah.
Which I found to be interesting, and there's a little bit of an illusion throughout this episode. We're getting a little bit more of Balin, a little bit more of Shin, kind of, which I think made the episode honestly better than it would have been otherwise. Because it seems like Shin knows about Balin's past as a Jedi, and I mean, even at one point asking like, "Do you miss the order?" And I'm just curious with you guys, like, do you think that Balin is going to continue down this path, or do you think there's going to be maybe a choice where he's going to be able to redeem himself, or because it feels like we're being set up for him to make a different decision than he might as like a Sith or like a dark side.
He said some interesting words at the end of his scene, I think, when he was looking out at like the landscape, saying like he had to break the cycle or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what cycle are we talking about? We're talking about like the typical rise to power cycle, where like, okay, the new rebellion or new republic is there. Someone's going to come in, take them down, and then someone's going to come in, and it's going to be this vicious cycle of just the good and evil. Their push and pull of the universe. And is he going to try and, like, stop that from happening? Is he going to, like, try and kill Thrawn to be like, okay, Thrawn's the next person who's going to kind of take over the galaxy.
Yeah.
He's the next person in this quote-unquote cycle. Do I need to stop that? Does he have an ulterior motive himself? I was just curious about what do you guys think this cycle he was talking about is?
I mean, he made it kind of clear to me. It's just like there's and he seems to be very well knowledgeable in the kind of the history of the Jedi, and this idea that there's a rebellion and there's like an empire, that empire falls, the New Republic rises, and then it like repeats. Like
Exactly.
there's this
Another
kind of
empire comes in.
back and forth and back and forth, and I think we can talk about it when we get a little bit more when we get there. But it's like there's this idea that he wants to go back to the beginning, and I don't know exactly what that means, but clearly he has an idea about what it means.
Yeah, to me, it almost feels like a polar opposite of or a foil of what like the decisions Luke had made in episode 8, where he's like, clearly there's a conflict that is cyclical, and where Luke chose to then remove himself to try and end that cycle.
Yeah.
Balin is taking a very active and violent role in that, trying to seize it and grasp it and try to force it in his own way to fit what he thinks is right. And it reminded me of I just recently finished up the Star Wars Ronin book, which is based off of the short the Ronin from Star Wars Visions.
Yeah, great short.
Great short. I'll be honest, I didn't love the book.
Okay.
But what I thought
Hot take here.
I thought it had some interesting ideas, and one of those interesting ideas is the main character is a Sith that had rebelled against the Jedi, then eventually betrayed and rebelled against the Sith because he had a vision of, this is the nature of the Force, is this conflict, this cycle of the light side rises and then the dark side rises and then the light side rises, and it's just like kind of endless bloodshed.
Yeah.
And it caused him to, in a similar way, be like, I think this should all just be shut down.
Yeah.
And that this conflict should be ended in general, which is an interesting thing for, I think, Star Wars to grapple with, considering what do we watch this story for? At the end of the day, we don't want to watch these characters farming peacefully, right? We want to see the conflict, but at the same time, that causes these characters that we know and love to constantly be in strife and in pain and to be going through this cycle of violence. And it's just an interesting thing for, and kind of, I don't know if this is meta, but a sort of meta way for this, IP to grapple with itself of just like, it promotes peace in the light side, but there's always going to be violence.
It's called Star Wars.
For there to continue the story to
Cam.
continue. Yeah, absolutely.
I think it actually harkens back to what you were talking about last week, where it's like you kind of need both sides, you know, and that is the nature of the Force. And I feel like, hearing you talk about that and that Ronin episode or that Ronin book, I feel like that may be the lesson that Balin is taught, is that there needs to be both sides in order for there to actually to be balance, or like that is the way the Force works. And maybe that's a hard reality for him to come to, or some version of that lesson will be taught, or he will just be pushed in a certain direction.
He even says to Shin that, like, you weren't raised in the Jedi temples. I trained you to be something more.
Yeah.
So he does not see them as Jedi. He doesn't see his apprentice as Jedi, even though she has the Padawan braid.
Yeah.
Even though they have that master apprentice relationship, they are not. And you even saw that a little bit in some of the rollout in the original pictures of their characters, is they were like, their blades are not quite red. They're like an orange ish. And there's not been a lot of gray Jedi in quote unquote gray Jedi, and Freddie Prinze Jr., the voice of Kanan Jarrus, famously went on a rant of like, those can exist, and I agree with a lot of what he has to say in that clip. But if there were going to be any sort of people that you could point to as being gray Jedi in Star Wars, it would be Ahsoka, and now it would be Balin and Shin.
Yeah,
that kind of exist sort of in between these binaries of Jedi and Sith.
I think it's just really interesting that we're getting all these kind of organic next sort of evolution of the Jedi and the Sith. It feels like they both train Padawans in a different way. There's no order. There is kind of Ahsoka's picking somebody who is not Force sensitive. Balin is training not to be a Sith, not to be a Jedi, or Shin in that way. But it feels very organic. It feels like this is a great kind of step forward for the franchise in a lot of ways, where you're not kind of going back to the same of Sith and otherwise. So,
and that actually reminds me of a post I saw on Reddit of all places.
Wow.
That I screenshotted, and a guy. Sorry, I didn't capture the name of the poster in my screenshot, so I can't give them credit, but they raised an interesting question. I thought, I mean, we've talked about it. I've heard other podcasts talking about it, how just ineffectual and flawed the New Republic is.
Yeah.
And this particular person brought up the fact that this New Republic doesn't have what the Old Republic had, which was a thriving, strong Jedi Order.
Yeah.
Thousands, if not tens of thousands of Jedi that can...
Who could do the diplomacy.
Who can and help and be like, okay, we can't send troops there. Like, certainly at one point for most of the Old Republic, they didn't have a standing army. And they relied on this Jedi Order that were not necessarily police officers, but peacekeepers to sort of negotiate and be these... bipartisan people that would help out with things, and that we hear them talk about that even as Ahsoka grapples with what the Jedi are becoming. But yeah, I mean, what do you guys think about that, with this idea of, well, yeah, they're not as good, and yeah, they're doing some things that maybe the Empire was guilty of as well, but because they don't have that thing that very much propped up the Old Republic. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think it is a sign. I mean, they kind of poke a lot of holes in the New Republic right off the bat on this show in a great way. And I think it's hard when you're trying to, as a New Republic, reset and kind of, okay, we don't want to do the things that the Old Republic did because they got thrown over by the Empire.
Yes.
But they also, it wasn't all bad. They definitely had some things going on, and I think the fall of the Jedi has kind of been like looked upon in this way of like, well, we don't need them, right? We don't need them. They were flawed. They basically gave rise to the worst thing that could have possibly happened, which was Vader and Palpatine, and they were completely had the wool pulled over their eyes, so they're not trusted. And I think that is an oversight, right? It is something where you need to have that level of like, okay, maybe it wasn't all bad. Like there's a gray area, right? It's like, and I think it's interesting how I always looked at this as like, how do the politicians react to seeing a Jedi for the first time?
Yeah.
And I feel like again, we kind of noticed at the beginning of the show where it's like the politicians are so obsessed with having their own kind of realm, okay, or like they're
on their own planet.
Exactly, and that they're kind of so hungry. They almost seem power hungry, and like the Jedi are we saw it every time a Jedi went to a new planet, and you get this kind of people are a little bit standoffish and like, but they have the backing of the overall government, and they have the backing of like they're super powerful.
Yeah,
and
I was gonna say, as a Jedi, they're already intimidating just because they can do things that you can't do.
Right, and so I think they're, as many people are, scared of things they don't understand. And a lot of these people that are in power right now probably were not around when the Jedi were doing their thing. So
they weren't fighting in the wars that were happening too, because that was something they brought up too when Hera's like, "Did you fight in the war?" The guy's like, "Well, no, I was waiting until this was over." Obviously, which a lot of them were. So they don't have the same kind of maybe. Like, I know how bad things can get, so we have to make sure things are really, really good, and we stop that from happening. Where, like you said, Keith, they're just like, we just want things to be normal on this planet. We don't really care about everybody else.
Right.
We just want the status quo here. So if you're gonna go bring this Thrawn guy back that's gonna upset this, I'm gonna say no to any of that.
Yeah. And like you were saying, Rob, before, like, Anakin was raised as a soldier, and like in the fighting, and a lot of the Jedi that are currently around, it's like they were soldiers at one point. They were that
well, and like Anakin had to tell Ahsoka that like, I was trained as a Padawan, but I got to train you as a soldier.
Yeah,
because of the times we're in.
Exactly.
And on top of that, certainly there's senators that are just trying to keep status quo on their planet because, number one, I mean, one of the first things we hear about the Senate in Episode 4, A New Hope, is that they've been disbanded.
Yeah.
So the Senate has not existed for, probably 5, 6, 7 years at this point. And everybody's probably still recovering because their planets are a mess.
Yeah, a total mess.
A lot of them have been pillaged by this empire for their resources to keep this war machine going and to stamp out any sense of rebellion, to the point where they're just like, I get that maybe there's this stuff going on, but we are still in rebuild phase.
Yeah.
And certainly, I mean, I think there's a level of many of these people probably weren't necessarily around or not in power when the Jedi were in power. But there has to be some level of them knowing that Luke Skywalker was the hero of the rebellion. Yeah. Like, he has a reputation at that point.
Yeah.
They have to know at some level, maybe they don't know exactly what or understand completely what a Jedi is, but that he was a Jedi.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, Luke's school so far, struggling.
Yeah.
Not doing so great. Yeah.
Ahsoka will not join.
Yep.
Leia has already bailed.
Grogu, he kicked out.
He kicked out Grogu.
He gave an ultimatum to the only student he had.
Luke is so far still the only Jedi around in that galaxy, and he's one dude.
Just one dude.
So what can one dude do? So
For real. Speaking of one dude doing one thing, Thrawn gives Sabine some provisions, one of these howl beasts to ride, which I thought were kind of cool. Like,
I don't know if they're totally real, but they looked real enough where I was like, maybe there was something on set that she was actually sitting on, because they looked very realistic to me.
yeah, they
Almost
did a good job with
animatronic
those.
Puppet,
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I mean, it was wolf, dog, bear,
It's like a
Yes.
bat
sing,
wolf
horse.
kind of thing.
Yeah. Before sending her away, he obviously lets her know that she took a huge gamble for her galaxy and a friend who could be very well dead. She fires back at him, saying that if he is alive, she is sure Ezra's just fine.
Yeah, that was a good date.
And then Thrawn tells Balin and Shin to follow her and to kill her and Ezra if she would find him, which was like, duh.
Yeah.
that's exactly what he would do. Yeah, of course.
Did anyone catch the couple scenes following Sabine's little journey where she was like bonding with the creature?
Yes.
It felt slightly out of place. I thought it was funny and cute, but I didn't realize that there was like a bond being formed between these two potential characters, because like when she was just given the ride, she was like, here's your animal, and like jump on it, and I was like, I'm assuming there was gonna be a relationship, but then there was this whole like sequence. So I was like, okay, that's kind of cute, but I guess it's kind of dragging things out a little bit. I don't know. How did you guys feel about that?
It felt like very half baked.
Yes.
It was like I was hoping if they were gonna do something like that. I mean,
Yeah.
it was fun. It was nice to see Sabine just not going.
It felt jarring when
whiny
they jumped
and-
into it though.
Yeah,
because
not
there was
like
no setup.
Yeah, not being like whiny or like complaining or betraying everybody
Yeah.
that she knows. But yeah, if there had been some sort of intro, be like, this is your beast, and her like reacting to that and
Yeah.
it reacting. No, it felt very much like Han getting on a tauntaun and like
Exactly,
running
yeah.
out and but it wasn't that. The
No.
tauntaun and
Essentially,
was now a character in the story. But yeah, so she gets in a bit of a scuffle because she's attacked by some bandits kind of out of nowhere, and she uses her blasters and gets shot quite a bit.
Well,
in
that
this fight.
Beskar armor is doing work this episode.
But end up whipping out her lightsaber and finishing the job with some ease.
Good to see her finally get a W. She needed
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
She's been getting kicked all over the place.
Yeah.
So it was good to see her holding her own a bit, even though she was abandoned by her howler there for as soon as
She
the
got
first sign of trouble.
so mad
Yeah,
at
she
that.
It's like, well, your whole job was to get me out of here, and you took off. Like, nah, I would have gotten a new mount.
Unfortunately, in the scuffle, her tracking or scanning device is damaged.
Oh, that's right.
And so she is out of luck. She turns to her companion, asks for his help or her help, and the howler begins to sniff the ground, eventually finding what she thinks is water, but turns out to be a turtle snail creature.
Crab people. I
Crab
thought these were
people.
like hermit crab people. So made me think of, crab people. Crab people.
The turtle snail rock creatures. What did you? I mean, this is like another great kind of little Star Wars race. I was kind of a big fan of these dudes.
Yeah.
They seem pretty cool.
So this whole world, this what was the planet called?
Perdidas, I
Perdita?
believe.
It felt very never-ending story-esque.
Paradia.
Paradia. If you guys are familiar with the
Yes.
never-ending story, it felt
Yeah.
very much along those lines. With like her like mount was like a weird like hybrid like animal like rat bat creature, kind of like the horse. That
Rat
they
bat.
And then there's like these rock creatures too, and the landscape itself just felt very like a planet with like it's got like some greenery on there, but it's very much like barren, kind of like there's nobody else there. It's like overcast. It just reminded me so much of like just a different type of like Star Wars planet that we've not been on. Which
Yeah.
is cool.
Definitely elephant graveyard vibes, like you're saying.
Yeah, no, I there's a lot I like about this planet and the new things they're introducing, both the crab people and the howler. And I mean, just to kind of touch on what we were talking about earlier, having her, bond with that mount feels very Star Wars to me, and that idea of them kind of giving an animal companion that like that the dark side people or the bad guys see as just like this is a creature and a tool of war. Yet when you put that same creature with somebody that's more on the lighter side, they see it more as an actual being, and
Yeah.
they're able to form a bond, and there's something deeper there, even to the point where people are shocked that Sabine is able to kind of have already formed this bond with something.
Yeah.
And as soon as I watched this too, I was just like, my wife is going to love this dog character. And sure enough, when we talked about the episode later, she was just like, I love him, I love that howler guy, he's great.
A lot of plush coming out of this. The end of
Yes,
this
a
year.
lot of toys being sold from this episode, I think.
Yeah, I like that she was, you're kind of worried about this beast kind of eating these little rock people, and there was
Yes.
like,
Yeah,
and there
it
was
was
like
that
that.
danger, too.
Is this gonna happen? Are they bonded enough for? And I think that was a fun little tension or like kind of playful thing to
For sure.
to roll into this, and a little bit of humor is never Never a miss. So after she finds this turtle snail creature, we don't quite know what they're called yet. They're trying to communicate, and she is doing the "I don't speak your language" voice, where she talks slow and loud, which I was just like,
That doesn't change anything.
it's just. But we'll just call them rock creatures.
Rock creatures.
Notices the rebel symbol on her armor and gets very excited, and then she notices that he has a necklace with the same symbol.
Yes.
They obviously then realize that they must kind of have some sort of connection, and she then asks to be taken to the camp. Once in their little nomad camp, Sabine looks around, taking it all in, and then she hears, "I knew I could trust you," and sees Ezra.
Ezra.
So what did you guys think about this reveal here and kind of
He's
the
so
lead up to
hairy
it?
now. He's got a beard.
Man.
He's a grown man.
Mountain man.
Very much so. Some people pointed out that he, this character, this version of Ezra looks very much like the way his father was animated, who was very briefly seen in Rebels.
He does.
He looks both in the clothing and just his general look. Again, the eyes are always a little like the bright eyes, because so many of the characters on Rebels have these like bright colored, like green,
very
blue
much so.
eyes that, again, I don't know if this is the actor's natural eyes, but if so, like, wow, those really are very bright. And so much so that I'm like, it's a little otherworldly to see that.
Yeah.
But generally, I thought this actor, he's got the feel of Ezra to me.
Yeah.
Like his characterizations, his line deliveries, that it very much felt like, oh, that is Ezra.
Yeah.
Even if he doesn't look exactly like he did when we last left him.
Yeah.
Right. Cam, what did you think?
No, I thought it was great. I mean, I'm glad they aged him up. Again, I don't know how people age in Star Wars. Some people age really poorly. Some people age well. He seems to have aged the most normal.
Yeah.
Okay, he's been away for like 10 years? Not 10 years.
Not
but-
quite. Well, no, it would have been, because he's been gone since through all of the stuff from the original trilogy, plus the 5-6 years it's been since Return of the Jedi. So he's been
About 10
lost about 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So he looked like he had aged 10 years.
Yeah. Unlike
Okay,
Sabine,
so
who
that's
looks 4 years younger somehow. But
Yes.
and acts
And
5
acts.
years younger.
Yeah,
It's like, so she turns to see Ezra. The two embrace. This moment was kind of interesting to me, because like this reveal and like it to me felt like if I betrayed my master,
Right.
like went with the enemy,
Mm-hmm.
had an opportunity to save the galaxy and chose not to, I would be like over the moon, like running at him, excited, like, oh my gosh, to see you. And then it was kind of like a, hey,
Sabine's too cool, man.
Yeah.
She's too cool for
all
anybody.
right, okay, fair enough.
She's
don't
done
know.
a whole lot to get here. I am with Keeps. Like, at least show something.
yeah, I mean, the hug was good. It just felt like they waited to get to that moment. Whereas, if I was Sabine, it'd be this moment of, oh, all this stuff that I've done
it's been worth
is
it.
now worth it,
Yeah.
and like,
I mean, Ezra asked pretty quick, like, "Oh, so how was getting here?" And she was like,
yeah.
"We won't talk about that."
talk about that later.
We'll table that for now, I think.
This was a moment where I struggled with this again, because knowing and watching some of Rebels, like Ezra's got really good instincts. He's got really
does.
good feelings about what's going on and where people are. And for two Force-sensitive people, his long-lost friend and the Night Sisters to all show up on a planet, and he doesn't go, hold on.
Like, what are you
Yeah,
doing?
like
here?
what's going on? Like something's weird, or for him not even mention like something. I knew something felt different, or like whatever. Recently, I was hoping for him to have a little bit more of a feeling of
'Cause you think
Force
of,
sensitivity.
Being
I guess.
here, what's he been doing this whole time on this planet? I would
Right.
assume practicing his abilities.
Right.
That we're going to see later in this in the next couple episodes. But yeah, and I'm assuming he's been on the run from Thrawn, because I'm assuming again Thrawn's probably been hunting him down on this planet.
Yep.
And it's probably been like a cat and mouse game for a while, because like obviously the community he's with has to move constantly. So yeah, his calmness and not questioning enough of her. Maybe he already knows and he didn't think he needed to question it.
Yeah.
And he'll reveal that in the next episode. I don't know.
Maybe all these little rock people are all secretly Jedi. Like,
Yeah, they're all in tune with their own version of the Force. Could be. I do agree that I think that there was an element of them wanting to have a happy reunion, especially to like make Ezra seem likable and charismatic to people that aren't familiar with his character, and also just to like maybe not have Sabine feel quite so awful about her decisions. But like in my mind, Ezra running into her again would probably be like, oh no,
Yeah.
what are you doing?
Yeah.
Again,
yeah.
Also true. Yeah, his reaction.
That
was a
would
bit
be
more
my
like that.
my how I feel like he might react having seen her for the first time, but maybe they felt that's not the direction they wanted to take, and for better or worse, that's obviously not what they did.
Yeah. Also, for her to like just roll up on like a howler and being like, "Sup?" It's like, where the heck did you come from? Like,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
no, there's
Where did all
no
this
ship.
happen? Yeah.
There's no like
Right.
rescue party. It's just like, oh yeah.
It's just like I was expecting this.
Ye-
But I mean, on the flip side, at the end of Rebels, Ezra does say in his little recording that like he looked at his options, or I don't know if he said it in the recording, but I remember him saying he was like, I looked at
He
my
essentially
options.
did, yeah.
Yeah, and he picked one specifically for a specific reason. So is this part of his expectations? Did he how far in the future did he see?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is kind of the question.
But
That's
like,
true.
but we as the audience of Ahsoka, never having seen Rebels,
Yeah, you
would
can't-
have
you
no
can't-
way of knowing
exactly,
that.
you
So
can't.
Well, there was the recording, I think, in episode 1 that Sabine is watching that I
Yeah.
believe is the same one that we see at the
I
end
don't
of
know how
Rebels.
much we get a recap of that, but it's definitely the same
I
recording.
think he mentions those same choices because
yeah,
that's why it's
you know
fresh
what?
in my
You're
mind.
totally right. He does mention like this was the only way, like
Yeah.
that he could. Yeah.
That
And
it
I
could
think
all come together.
it's just it was a little bit heartbreaking, you know. I think
Yeah,
that was,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I get that, and yeah, it's good that we can again. This has happened. I'm glad. We've got 2 episodes left. This reunion has happened, and we can kind of go forward. Of like, we're not sitting around waiting for these characters to still show up.
Yeah.
We can
They're
now
here, and
move
now they gotta
forward.
do
They're
stuff.
here.
Yeah.
Let's get to the good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the other point about this, just going back to my Sabine point again, is like, what's the play now? Is she just gonna hang out on this planet forever
Yeah,
with
I
Ed?
was-
Like, there's no way out. Like, they have no way of getting off.
Again,
like
that
this.
harkens to more or less what were you expecting from the beginning of signing on for getting in bed with the bad guys and getting here to get Ezra? What was the plan from the beginning? Was
Yeah.
there one? Were you gonna chill here with Ezra? Were you expecting it to be just like we're on vacation together, or are we coming back and we're gonna stop Thrawn? Like it's kind of like she never really had a plan. It seems.
Yeah, because Ezra's question is, so it's like, so I can't wait to go home, and it's
Yeah.
like,
And she's like,
oh,
you can tell she thought about everything that just
she's like,
happened.
oh, I made a huge mistake.
Yeah. I mean, luckily for them, they don't know this, but Ahsoka is on her way.
Right.
Hopefully, knock on wood, with a pretty decent ship.
Yeah.
It's just about how are they going to get back.
Yeah.
They're going to have
And
to
how are
get
they gonna
inside
stop
of Purgle
and
again.
inevitably try and stop Thrawn from getting back too? Because that's more or less that's Ahsoka's mission is to
I
stop
don't think
Thrawn.
that's going to happen.
I don't think
yeah.
either, and it's going to be interesting if this is a bittersweet ending for this series.
I think it will.
So
be,
I
personally.
have a prediction on this. Actually.
Okay.
I think it's going to come down to Ahsoka has to make a decision to stop Thrawn or save Sabine, or leave her on the planet and see Sabine and Ezra.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the end this decision, and I think she's going to go with Sabine and.
She's gonna do what Sabine did and go against what the right thing or the greater good, essentially.
Yeah. And maybe there'll be more justification to it than that, and it'll seem a little bit more. But I think that's maybe where we're headed. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think I touched on this a little bit in some earlier episodes and recaps we've talked about. I feel like this is going to have a darker ending.
Yeah.
I think this is going to end with like Cap saying, "Oh my God!" Like after the snap,
Yeah.
like where
Yeah.
they're just like, "Oh, something bad just happened and it's about to get worse."
Yeah.
And I think based on what we know of what's coming down the pipe of Star Wars and what they've announced as far as like their intentions for future projects, we don't know exactly what the plot of them will be, but I think we're going to see. I think this story is going to spin more and more out of control and get larger before it gets smaller, and we're going to see probably some sort of continuation of the conflict between this Imperial remnant and Thrawn's last gasps or his attempt to restart or reclaim the Empire. And we already know that from Mando season 3 that there are Imperial remnants that are still around, some of which that are not at all interested in what Thrawn is up to.
Yeah.
And if anything, are just like, well, we're not in this cult of Thrawn that you all seem to be interested in.
Right.
And those people could be the ones that are going off and doing, forming the First Order, embarking on this, project. I forget what it's called, but essentially cloning and recreating,
resurrecting the Emperor,
the Emperor.
Yeah.
And that could be their particular
Project Reboot.
Yes, exactly. Project somehow Palpatine is returned. So I think we're going to see this being one branch of that remnant's plan to try to topple this new this new republic, and then those that are not a part of it are like, well, they had the wrong idea.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So the two start to round up the camp. As Ezra explains, they never stay in one place for too long. And episode 6 kind of ends with Thrawn realizing that Ahsoka is probably still alive, which I thought was kind of a great moment of
Yeah.
like, okay, this dude kind of knows what's up. Like this,
Yeah.
Elspeth clearly, despite getting captured by her and everything, just still continues to underestimate Ahsoka.
Yeah.
And he goes to the Night Mothers saying that he will need their help with dark magic again. So what do we think that help is going to be exactly? Do you think that we're going to be conjuring some dead soldiers? Think there's going to be some sort of
maybe another Marek like 2.0.
Oh,
like
that's an interesting
bigger,
thought.
heftier one. Because I'm thinking because Thrawn in Rebels, obviously it's easier to make an animated character fight people one-on-one and
Yeah.
all that. His character now seems a little aged out of like, I'm going to stand toe-to-toe with you.
Yeah.
Although we know from the show, Thrawn can do that.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's gonna. Yeah, I feel like a henchman. Because my other thought would be if this was animated, he would get like himself souped up with like some magic and
Right.
then go fight Ahsoka. I don't think that's what we're gonna see.
I don't think so.
But I could see them bringing maybe like a Savage Opress type henchman or something like that. It would be very interesting.
Yeah.
That could be it. To me, my read was he was going to use them as sort of like, his own personal Google, because it seemed like when Balin showed up, he was just like, "Oh, Balin Skull, Jedi General. Like, of course, I knew about you."
Yeah.
And Thrawn was, I believe, involved in some of the Old Republic forces, because there's a whole book about him having spent time with Anakin.
Oh, wow.
Have the two of them having worked together at parts of the Clone Wars. And so he, I don't believe, knows who Ahsoka is, but it's just like, hey, Night Sisters, I'm going to need your magic to kind of figure out more of who I'm about to go up
He
against.
did basically
Yeah.
ask for the file on
Right.
Ahsoka essentially, and
I need the file quick.
it's going to be interesting if they do touch on his possible relationship with Anakin. The flashback she just saw, is he going to find out that she is Anakin's apprentice and try and use that against her possibly
Yeah.
when they finally meet?
I mean, I think it's very telling of him as a character that, based on how tactical he is, by not necessarily just being like, send out all the fighters and just
Yeah.
being like, let's find out who this person is. Which
That's very much
I was
Thrawn.
shocked based on, I know he's in Rebels, I know Ahsoka's in Rebels, and the fact that the two didn't know, or like that he didn't know who Ahsoka was
Yeah.
a big surprise to me, honestly. I thought he would know all about her, but apparently not.
I don't remember them having much
don't think they
overlap
encountered.
as far as characters, because her tenure on Rebels kind of comes to a close right around the end of the second season,
Yeah.
which is when he shows up.
Yeah.
And that's when she fights Darth Vader. We don't know what happens to her, and then we pick up back with her when Ezra goes into the world between worlds and pulls her out and does that whole piece, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and
That's her.
when she's reinserted into the timeline, wherever that is,
Yeah.
she's still back on that Sith planet. She's not with the rebels on Lothal, so she's not
Exactly.
part of that
She's still doing
final
her own
conflict.
thing.
Yeah.
With at the end of Rebels, that leads to Thrawn's ultimate defeat. So she may be aware of who he is, and obviously she knows what Thrawn is capable of. But she was so underground at the time, operating as Fulcrum, that her identity is probably not
Public knowledge.
Public
yeah,
knowledge.
Yeah. That makes sense. That
Yeah.
makes sense. And there's one moment we kind of touched on already, but there was this moment at the end between Balin and Shin where they're kind of hot on the trail of, and there's these bandits kind of watching them, and he says there's no need for bloodshed. What did you guys make of that moment? I thought that was a very interesting choice to kind of put that in there, because there's we know they're going after.
Yeah. But we don't know if these
Sabine.
mercenaries are on whose side they're on, if they're on their own side.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I feel it shows that Balin's more or less he's not one to rush into conflict for conflict's sake.
Yeah.
He's
Yes.
no, we're after this. We have a mission. These people aren't part of it. They're gonna. They get in our way. We'll take them out, but they're probably not going to. Was kind of the reading I got from it.
Yeah, I found it just very interesting. I feel like we got a lot more Shin.
Agreed.
And I feel like she's a lot more than just some angry girl who wants to
Yeah.
hit people as a Padawan, and I really like that aspect of her, that she is clearly questioning things, and their relationship I find to be very weirdly great. They have a great kind of I ask questions and then I answer, and they're supportive of each other, and it's very surprising, because you see kind of a dark side apprenticeships, and it's usually really abusive relationships.
Usually it is.
Yeah.
Apprentice is gunning for the master almost always, and you don't really have that. She's not kind of undermining him or trying to take his power, essentially.
Yeah, and they kind of faked it out a little bit, because I felt when there's that big battle and Shin wants to kill basically Sabine, and he goes, no, I was like, is she going to be just gunning for her the whole time?
Mm-hmm.
But then you have this moment in this episode where she's like, you're going to break your promise to Sabine? You're...
Especially...
And it's
well, sorry, go
No,
ahead.
finish.
Well, I was going to say that, because he stopped her and made it seem so important of just like, I gave my word. So if for him to then kind of contradict himself to then break that, I think is where she was just like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Because I agree that I think Balin has proven exactly what you said, Cam, to be not only a man of his word, at least maybe to the letter, in such a way that gives him wiggle room to get out of it.
Yeah.
But he doesn't want conflict for conflict's sake.
Yeah.
He's a master manipulator. And
Yeah.
my read on that scene is he's probably going to approach these bandits of just being like, we have a common goal. We have a common enemy.
Yeah. I mean, he
I
said
didn't
that.
kill
Yeah.
these folks.
Yeah.
You know, we can work together, and he seems very good at, he's very charismatic,
Yep.
very well spoken, and can bring people to his side just using his own viewpoints and
Yeah.
talking with them.
Yeah.
And I think that comes from a very good Jedi training
Yeah.
that he's using for darker purposes.
Reminds me of you, Rob.
Ah,
All right, folks. Well, that'll do it this week on the Bacta podcast. We will be back to next week with part 7.
Yeah.
2 left, penultimate
Yes.
episode. So please make sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on Spotify, Instagram, YouTube, all of the things. And
Yes.
may the force be with you.